Hey everyone, it's Kendra Tanner here. How are you? I'm just getting myself seated, and we're just going to have a really great chat today about how you can start to understand and do something different when it comes to your relationship with food and body and yourself. So I just finished doing the morning, I think it's called the power yoga that normally Many teaches and Emily taught this morning. And it was really a great reminder of how we can get stuck in patterns and doing things that for a while they're probably serving us and they're probably giving us what we need. And then after a while, they don't really help us anymore, and it's time to start to change. And Emily was talking about in yoga the concept of samskara. I think I'm saying that correctly. And so essentially what I've found with our relationship with our food and our bodies and ourselves, we have our own samskaras with that, our own patterns and our own habits and our own ways of relating. And today I'm going to share a little bit about what I have found about what happens in those patterns, some common patterns that for a while, like I said, they probably are giving you what you need, and after a while, you're just over it and you're done with it and you want to try something new. And so we'll talk a little bit about what's not working and then what I found to work, and not from a diet perspective or another controlling perspective or restricting perspective, but something that's sustainable and very much includes you and what works for you and what you need in the process. So I like to do before I start anything is just have a moment to pause. Helps myself ground and lets you do the same and just get situated. So if you're watching this, I'll just ask you to pause with me for, 30 seconds, a minute, we'll see what happens. And just during that pause, just really start to notice, right? The first step in any kind of change process is to notice. And notice what is currently happening, because if we're not connected to the present, we're not going to be able to start doing something differently going forward. So if you want to close your eyes, you can. I'm going to do that. And perhaps as you're finding a place of stillness, see if you can notice what's going on in your body. How quickly are you breathing? What pace is your heart beating at? See if you can notice your breath. How deeply or shallow is that breath? And notice without judgment, without any comparison, without any shoulds of what your breathing should be like. We're just grateful that we're breathing right now. Perhaps you want to notice how you're feeling. Do you have a sense of peace? Is there anxiousness about the future? Are you worried about what happened in the past? Is there excitement? Is there a bit of fear or trepidation? And again, noticing without judgment. And just having gratitude for the fact that you're taking this time to spend time with yourself and notice. And just bring your attention to your external surroundings. Can you hear anything? Can you smell anything? Feel anything on your skin? When you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And I'll continue talking. First off, thanks for joining me on that. As I said before, practicing that pause and practicing that stillness is the first step to be able to start to make change. So it's something that I found to be so critical and so helpful, and not just with food and body, but just with anything in life. One of the women who did the True You Journey course last year with me, she was a champ of practicing the pause. And she just reminded me yesterday that she's starting to use it, that anytime she wants to buy a book, she'll pause and see if they have it at the library first. Such a great idea, right? Like, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't gone to a library in decades, but yeah, it's a way to get the books that I want and try before I buy, right? Or maybe you never have to buy. So that was awesome. I just spilled water all over myself. Okay, so I'm gonna dry myself off. I'm gonna pause a little bit right there. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So noticing what's not working with our relationship with food and body and self, and then finding a way to start to do something different and in a sustainable way. I'm going to use a lot of my story to share with you, because that's something that I know really well, and I don't know your story, but I can share with you from what I've learned and what I've experienced, in the hopes that it connects to something within yourself. I'll also say this, that starting on Sunday, so Sunday, February 11th, I'm starting a 9-week course that is going to go into a lot of what I'm going to talk about today a lot further. So if anything that I'm saying is really hitting home with you, then please get in touch, and I'd love to have you join us starting on Sunday. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. So what's not working with relationship to food, body, and self? So the way that I see it is that food serves two purposes. There's kind of this intersection of a sweet spot of food, that it's there to nourish you and it's there to be pleasurable. It's there for you to enjoy. And when we are using and choosing, making choices with food where we're in that intersection of the nourish and the pleasure, then that's great. And I'll just say this, that kale and cake can both be the right choice for you, that tick the nourish and pleasure box. The key there is to really understand what is it you're needing at that moment in time, what's going to nourish you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just on a nutrients basis, but what is going to nourish your whole soul, your whole self, and also what's enjoyable. Because if you hate kale, then don't eat it. No matter how many phytochemicals or folic acid or whatever is in that, find something else that you're going to enjoy and nourish yourself with that. So that's kind of something, that's like one really simple thing you can start to think about is, when am I making choices with food that are nourishing and pleasurable for me? And what happens when I do that? And what happens when I don't? When it comes to body, I think our body is similar. You can use the nourish and pleasure thing for it, but I think ultimately the simplest way I think about my body is that my body allows me and it gives me permission to exist in this world. And for a really long time, I was trying to control my body. I was trying to use my body for my self-worth, and really hinge my identity on what my body looked like. And and I think we do that. It's such an easy thing to do, because our bodies is how we're presented, right? It's how the first thing we see with our eyes, and in a snap second we can make a snap judgment about somebody. And at the same time, that's not everything, right? What you see isn't what you get with people. And so what I've had to learn to do is to really untangle my relationship with my body, with my relationship with myself, and learn to value myself aside from any physical attributes of myself, and really connect to internal qualities to give me a source of confidence, and also with that permission to actually be myself, and not feel like I need to be changing or morphing myself into somebody else, whether that's physically looking different or just personality-wise or career-wise or hobbies and interests, and really step away from the shoulds that I was feeling in my life to say, no, you have permission to just be you and be free to be you. And for those of you that are familiar with the work that I'm doing, I call it the True You and the True You Project. And it's essentially because at the end of the day, our relationship with food, with body, and to be honest, anything else in life, so whether that's money, career, romantic relationships, kids, health, all that kind of stuff, all of that hinges back to this one thing, which is me, my true you, the real me beneath all the layers. And the more that I can access and understand who I am, the more that I can love and trust myself, and the more that I can give permission to be myself, and the same goes for you, the more that you can do that for yourself, the less that all these other extraneous outward expressions of yourself will start to matter. And the more that they will actually be aligned with who you really are and what you value in the world and what you can create in the world and what you bring to the world. So while today I'm going to be using food and body as a main example, understand that if you're watching this and that's not really like a big issue for you, that's okay. You can substitute that with any other area of your life where you might be feeling some struggle, things not really going the way you wanted them to or planned, and uncertainty, okay? So going back to what's not working, essentially, as I mentioned before, there's this idea of nourishing pleasure with food, but the sweet spot of whatever, nourishing and pleasure with food, but that sweet spot of food is going to line up with you being in the sweet spot of yourself, right? So that's where the two connects with your true you. And a lot of times what can happen is what we start to do is use food or other things in our life, whether that's money or drugs or shopping or whatever, to substitute for something else, right? And there's three common patterns that I see. So one is we can start to use it for control. So we can start to use food to control our emotions. Maybe we're feeling uncomfortable and we think, well, if I'm not eating, and then that kind of gives us a sense of stability inside. We can use it to control our weight and control our body. We can use other forms of control in life, and that essentially is just a fear reaction. So two other things that can happen is we can use it for comfort. So we might be feeling something uncomfortable, might be facing some uncertainty, and choosing to comfort instead of control. Same scenario. Uncertainty is a great one, right? I don't know when how I'm going to pay the bills. I have this thing going on at work that's freaking me out. Uncertainty in relationships, whatever. Hear that all the time. Uncertainty. Even just so simple things like, I've got some free time on a Saturday afternoon where my family's not going to be around, and I don't know what I'm going to do at that time, and that uncertainty can swing us into comfort or control. The third thing is numb. So just sort of like numb and suppress and pretend that the emotions aren't really there and feel something different instead. And so food can be used as something to connect to ourselves. When we don't want to feel what we're really feeling, we can use food to connect to instead. So those three reactions, the control, the comfort, and the numb, those are all essentially fear-based reactions. And again, you can have those reactions with anything, not just food. And so really part of the solution is to understand, why am I in fear? And how could I start to respond to that fear differently? And the word that I use to broad stroke sum up how to respond differently is, how could I respond with love? I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but that's what we're working with here. And I was able to drink that without dousing myself. Awesome. Okay, so just have a think for yourself if you're watching this, like if you do any of those three broad stroke categories. Do you use food to control? Do you use it to comfort? Do you use it to numb? And I suppose there's a link with your body here, in the sense that sometimes you can use food to control your body, but let's take that one step further. Why am I trying to control my body? And the word that comes up for me when I ask myself that is, a lot of times it's because I don't actually feel safe in my current relationship with my body. And so I don't have trust to my body. So maybe I've had experiences that tell me that that my body or my appearance, it's not safe. It's either not bringing the attention that I want, or it's bringing too much of the attention that I want. And so we can then use food to try to change our body so that we are then getting these results that we want, the attention or the love or acceptance or whatever it is. Sometimes our relationship with our body isn't actually that connected to food. Like sometimes it's just, I know a lot of women that I've come across, they've had a lot of health issues with their bodies. So whether it's autoimmune or hormonal, or even just like post-pregnancy, right? And so their body isn't just functioning the way it used to anymore. And there can be a sense of loss with that, and also some fear in that, right? Of the fear of uncertainty of, well, what's going to happen next with my body? And so again, we can start to try to go into that, like controlling our bodies, using our body to comfort ourselves. And also I think with that strain of comfort kind of comes this like, screw it. And then also just kind of like disconnect and not feel from our bodies, because maybe they don't feel safe, or maybe we're kind of disgusted with our bodies, or it just doesn't feel comfortable to be in our bodies. So I could probably go off on like a whole nother tangent with that, and I'll save that for another day. But just to understand that, check in with yourself to see, is there a connection between how you relate to food and then how that might translate how you relate to your body and then to yourself? But also to know that perhaps they're not, there might be somewhat linked, but not exclusively. So you'll know that better than I do. For me, mine were like this. I was using the food to control my body so that I could get the acceptance that I wanted. So there it is in a nutshell. Okay, so let's start to look at what you might be able to do differently. So if you're watching this, if you want to just put a little note to say, does this make sense? Or if you have any questions, then feel free to, and I'll try to respond. And I know I may have to just move this so I can see comments. Okay, cool. I think I might be able to see comments now. Ooh, I just turned that the other way. That was not expected. I don't know how I did that. That's so funny. All right, we're going to turn this back, which means I definitely won't be seeing any comments. Okay, I hope that you can see me now. All right, so what might work instead? So you might want to pause this too and just check in with yourself what makes sense of what I said, and like how that translates into your own story before we go on. So what I have here, if you can see it, is actually a sort of workbook self-study guide that I put together that essentially sums up what you can do instead. And this is what we use as the structure and the content of the course, Your True You Journey, that's coming up on Sunday. And it's laid out in a semi-intentional way. I think with our bodies and food, you can kind of pull on, it's like a tangled ball of string, and you can use, you can kind of pull on any end of the string and access it, but sometimes having a bit of a place to start helps as well. So we're going to start with this first idea of it's okay to let go. So it's okay to let go is something that it has been probably the hardest thing for me to actually embrace and adopt in my life, because I am someone who does not like uncertainty, doesn't really like a lot of risk. And so my MO for most of my life was to make very certain decisions, and if the uncertainty was there, just to control. And so the way that this can manifest itself with your relationship to food and body is, well, how it manifested for me was that I wasn't necessarily felt like I was fitting into my peer groups when I was a teenager. And so working backwards, I could control my body. And how would I do that? Control with food and with exercise as well. And so I had to really start to, when I was finally in a place where I was like, this isn't sustainable anymore, and I was in the middle of an eating disorder, and it was finally, this isn't working, then I had to say, wait, well, how do I stop? How do I get out of this pattern? How do I get out of this cycle? How do I undo this samskara, right, that Emily was saying in yoga this morning? And for me, it started with letting go. And it was as simple as, I have to get rid of the pair of jeans that I keep trying to fit into on a Saturday night. Because every Saturday, every week, not going to fit into these anymore. And so instead of continuing to fight my body and resist the fact that my body was bigger than it used to be, and trying to change that, just sort of accept and surrender a little bit that actually, you know what, these aren't going to fit. And so let me remove them from my house so that I have a lot more space to just be where I am, really present to the moment. And so that's a very specific example, and it's okay to let go can go beyond that too, because I think a lot of times what goes on beneath the surface with our relationship to body and food is who we think we need to be and who we think we're supposed to be. And so if I think back to that time in my life as well, I was placing expectations on myself that I needed to earn a certain amount. I needed to have a certain type of apartment. I needed to hang out in certain bars, or have certain friends, date certain guys, that kind of thing. All these external factors that I was defining myself by. And a lot of it boiled down to performance and achievement and success. And so part of what I've learned, and to be honest, it's taken me a long time to figure this part out, but I'm starting to realize, actually, I need to let go of that too. Right? I need to let go of what success looks like for me, and achievement and performance. And once I can let go of that, it starts to create space for me, who I really am, to come to the surface, and also to make change and start creating different habits and different patterns in my life that are a lot healthier and a lot more sustainable. And so just to link those two ideas for a minute, this idea of performance, success, achievement is something that I see so often with people who are struggling with food and their body. And so they might have that in other areas of their life, career, relationships, etc. But how you do anything is how you do everything. So all of that starts to trickle over and bleed over to, and I have to be successful with my body, and I have to be successful with my diet, right? And so it becomes a very all or nothing, black or white way of looking at it. I'm either on the diet and that's a success, or I'm off it, right? I've either got married or I failed and got divorced, right? And there's very little room for this middle ground that's actually where life happens, where it doesn't have to be a judgment call. It's just, this is step by step where life is taking me. So that's the first thing, it's okay to let go, which then leads to the second one. And for this one, I actually have a card here, which hopefully you can see. It might be backwards, but it says, my presence is enough. So my presence is enough is the second thing that to throw into the mix, which is essentially a counterpose to inner critic, shame, judgment, comparison, and assumptions. So if you think about going back to my example with these pair of jeans that I was trying to fit into, well, my presence is enough gave me permission to just show up that night, whether it was for dinner with friends or out to a bar or a club or whatever. And who cares what my body looks like, because my presence is what matters, right? People aren't hanging out with me because of what they see. They're hanging out with me because of who I am. And that was like a really, really, really hard thing for me to accept, because like I said before, so often I had hinged my worth on my appearance and other achievements in my life, not just my heart and my friendship and personality or quirks or whatever, right? And so often we try to change ourselves into being somebody else because we don't think we're enough as we are. And this reminder is huge, huge, huge. And so this, I think directly, I mean, they all do, but this directly feels like it connects to, especially physical and the body, to say that, you know, what I'm looking like is less important to who I'm being with you. And this is something that has given me so much freedom, and that I hope gives you freedom just listening to this, and just this reminder of presence. And there's this really awesome equation that you can make with it if you're into math equations, that presence is greater than performance. And so whether that's performance with your body, performance with food, performance just in life, your presence and who you're being is so much more valuable. It's why you're here, so own it. Okay, the third thing we're going to talk about is this idea of fear. So as I mentioned before, fear often, it drives the bus of our relationship with food and body and self. It's what swings us into the control, comfort, or numb patterns. So we've just hit upon two fears, I think, anyway. So the first one, this fear that, like, I need to live up to this expectation and this supposed to for my life, and what happens if I don't. And as well as the fear of the criticism from either other people or just our own criticism. Other fears that we can be faced with are failures, fear of rejection, huge one. Fear of missing out, that's a big one that comes into play with food. The fear that if I don't eat this right now, it's not going to be there for me later. And that can be a pattern and something that we learn from our childhood or for our families, especially when there's a lot of scarcity and there's not a lot of abundance in our lives. So fear, it's everywhere. And I was reminded this morning in yoga with Emily, right? Like, fear stops us from really being present. Once again, right? The same theme, because we were doing this crazy ass pose with, like, your leg was like up like this, and she was just saying, you know, watch out for the fear, that the fear isn't going to stop you. The fear isn't going to stop you from taking each baby step that's going to get you into the pose. And I think so often that's such a great metaphor, because in life so often we think we need to be here, we need to be at the end already, either today or yesterday, and actually we need to be taking one step at a time. And if we're super present at each of those steps, that's going to get us to an end. Might not be the exact end. We might have to let go of exactly what that outcome is going to be, but it's going to keep us present to ourselves in the whole process, which means there's more of a chance we're going to get into that pose, whatever that looks like for your life. So the counter pose to fear is love. As I mentioned before, love never fails. And I think love is such this amorphous, energetic ball of goodness. And again, we can access it from a number of directions, two of them being to accept that my presence is enough, to surrender a little bit in the process. And there's also things like having courage. There's things like really being connected to ourselves and to others. Sometimes love means that we have to say no, that we have to actually choose ourselves before we're giving all the time. Sometimes love means we have to step back and receive. There's so many different aspects to love, but any of them can be a gateway into changing your relationship to food, body, and self. So I'll just bring that to a specific example let's start with body. So I used to run a lot, and I used to run for specific purposes of burning calories and, again, performance. And I was an athlete in high school and college, and so there was a lot of a performance pressure environment. I can distinctly remember days where the pain, and it wasn't like joint pain, it wasn't like, typical, like, yeah, I had shin splints every now and then, but forget that. But it was like the pain I was putting myself through to go for a run, even just the pain to get out the door. There wasn't enjoyment of it, there wasn't love of the process, and it was very much like a punishing activity. Like, you ate too much yesterday, you binged last night, maybe you even threw up this morning, go run it off. It was like a very clear punishment. It was not a loving action at all. And so this is what I would ask you to think about, is how for yourself, where are you taking loving actions towards yourself and your body, and where are you taking actions that maybe are based on more fear, maybe punishment, that control element of it. Maybe it's swinging to the other side where it's actually a lack of care because there's too much indulgence, or I'm not worth it, or I'm just going to let myself go, right? We can swing to either side of the continuum, and neither one of those are loving for ourselves. So something you can ask yourself is, what's an actual loving action I can do for my body? What does my body actually need right now, and how can I care for it? Care, huge part of love, right? The same thing with food. I love using this example because it's so woo-woo, but it's so true. So I'm sure if you're watching this, there's probably somewhere in your mind you've got like some like food rules, like good foods, bad foods, and we'll get to that. Well, when you're eating a bad food, right? Say it's like chocolate or a piece of cake or whatever. I swear to God that when you're eating it with the mindset of like, oh my God, I shouldn't be doing this, there's a bit of guilt involved. There's sort of this like forward planning of like how you're going to undo what you're just about to do, right? When you're doing all of that, not loving. When you're sitting down and you're like, this is the most beautiful piece of cake I've ever seen. I'm so grateful to the person who made it. I'm so grateful for all the like wonderful ingredients in there. And I am going to take one bite and savor it. I'm going to take another one and really delight in the flavors in my mouth. I'm going to allow the pleasure, and this whole experience is nourishing me. I swear to God, your body responds to those same ingredients differently than when you're eating it with guilt and with shame and with fear. I don't know how to explain that, but it happens. So that's how you can bring love into your relationship with food, is to be again, that word present, be really present with it, finding that nourishment and pleasure, that sweet spot, and making food choices that at any given moment are giving you the nourishment and pleasure you need. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is basically once you're doing all of that on a continuous basis, practicing letting go, practicing my presence is enough, practicing love never fails, what happens is you're starting to create new patterns of actually giving yourself permission to just be yourself, because you're no longer trying to conform to who you think you need to be, whether that's through food or something else. And so the next one we're going to talk about is this one. I'm free to be me. And so I'm free to be me is awesome, right? Why would you want to be anyone else? But so often we do need to give ourselves permission to actually be ourselves. And first comes accepting ourselves who we are, not trying to be somebody else, and loving ourselves as we are and caring for ourselves. And so part of free to be me is actually knowing, well, what kind of care do I need? And connecting, what are my feelings? What are the emotions that are going on inside of me? what do I need in my life to support myself emotionally? And so this, again, is like a whole nother tangent into understanding our feelings and learning how to respond to them in ways that are actually healthy and sustainable. And there's so many feelings and emotions that we can, again, polarize, and we can say they're good or bad. And so part of Free to Be Me is saying, no, like, I'm not going to judge my feelings. I'm going to give myself permission to feel the full range. I'm going to give myself permission to get angry, to feel the fear of uncertainty. I'm even going to give myself permission to feel a little bit guilty, and not to go on a guilt trip, but to understand that if I'm feeling guilty, it's probably because I wanted to make a different choice. And so how freeing is that to actually understand, oh my goodness, my guilt is just a sign that I could have chosen differently. So guess what? Next time you can, right? Like, it's that simple. So Free to Be Me, I'm getting caught up a little bit in the course itself because there's so much goodness in there that I love talking about. And I'll also just bring it back to real life, is that when, for me, in my own recovery, Free to Be Me looked like starting to make those choices that I knew were actually reflective of me. And so it was moving to a neighborhood that felt more where I fit in more. It was buying shoes that really delighted me and were an expression of myself, right? Wearing clothes that felt more, again, an expression of myself. And so with Free to Be Me, something that you can do right now is understand and check in with yourself. What is it that is me? An expression of me, or a way to care for myself that's unique to me? And start making choices that align with that. So another example is I stopped running so much and I started playing soccer because I love soccer. And so the more I started to do those things, the other cool thing is that a ripple effect of that was that I was feeling a lot better in myself, and so I didn't need the food to comfort myself or control, because I was no longer living in fear. So you can just ask yourself, what would be one thing that you could start doing that gives yourself permission to be you? And just go do it and let me know, because I'd love to know that. Okay, so a few more things to introduce into yourself. I mentioned before this idea of black and white thinking. Something that kind of cuts the chase there is this T word, truth, right? We can so often get caught up in what everyone else is telling us, all this noise about the good food to eat, the bad food to eat. One day it's organic, then no, organic's no good, then it's vegan, no, vegan's not good, all this stuff, right? So really, there's a multi-layered approach here, but one, there's objective truth, right? I used to always think that fat was so bad for me. Well, I had this fear of fat, of eating fat, because it would make me fat, is my logic, right? Well, it turns out that I need fat, my body needs fat. That was a truth that was not accessible to me at that time. So one thing you can start to do is just kind of make a list to say, what are all these fears I have around food, or my good and bad list, and just start to objectively what is actually true. The other thing you can start to do is just understand, well, what's my personal truth? So not only does my brain need fat, but my personal truth is that when I eat nuts, I feel satiated and I don't crave more food. So that may not happen for you, but that happens for me. And so when I discover that truth and then I own that truth, then all of a sudden my food choices are aligned with who I am, and it's sustainable. And I'm cutting down on cravings, and I'm actually nourishing and satiating myself, okay? So that's the fifth. We have three more. Truth sets you free. It's really that simple. The objective truth and your own personal truth when it comes to food in your body. You can do the same thing for body and exercise, right? What works for you, your personal truth and the objective truth. The next one, we've got another card for this one too, is actually about your body. So my body is mine to celebrate. So with this one, this is a huge one. Like if you had asked me even 5 years ago, do you celebrate your body? I'd be like, what are you talking about? No, I like my body. I'm grateful for my body. Celebrate it? Hell no. But my point here is that it's probably not going to be your first step, but it's totally accessible after time and you're creating those new patterns. So my body is mine to celebrate. This actually came from a client of mine. I'm so grateful to her. So yeah, your body is amazing, and sometimes we forget that. Not only does it let you be here and exist, but it functions without you like needing to tell it to. And so often we can get caught up in the judgment and comparison of our bodies, and we forget to actually be grateful for it, and we get to actually celebrate what is working. And so I was actually thinking about this morning. We were doing that crazy pose, like with our legs up here. And I mean, I have no idea what I looked like. And I probably don't want to see what that looks like on video, although perhaps I just did. And I just was thinking, like, how could I what would celebrating my body be like right now? And I think, sometimes it's just as simple as saying, wow, this is really freaking cool that my body can do this. And sometimes it is starting a gratitude practice for your body. Maybe it's something like taking a hot bath when you get home from yoga or whatever. But it's combining that care with the gratitude and joy, and really, really getting to know your body for what it is. Like, if this is a really cool thing. So my business partner in the US, her name's Liberty, she introduced me to this really cool idea. What if your body wasn't your body? What if it was just this body? How would that change how you related to it? And if you had this body over here, is there anything you could celebrate about it? I don't know. Ask yourself. See what you come up with. Okay. Next to last one, I am here to shine. So what does shining and your brilliance have to do with food and body, right? That's the big one. So two things there. One, you are brilliant. And so the more you can own that for yourself, then the more you have your confidence there, the more that you are using courage and actually like making those choices where you're free to be you, and then you don't need food to compensate for where you're not being you, and you can celebrate your body for how it is, right? So just owning your own brilliance is a huge step. And to be honest, that's probably taking me longer than I care to admit, but that's a process, right? That's a journey. The other thing is that I am here to shine also is a really great reminder that life isn't all about us, and that yes, our relationship to food and body is an essential part to our life. However, when we get so caught up in what we look like, what we're eating, the amount of attention and energy that can suck out of our life, when actually we could be using that time to make a difference or serve or care and contribute in the lives of the people around us, or the environment, or animals, or whatever your passion is, right? So I am here to shine. I need that reminder often, because I can really get caught up in, it's the ego thing, right? Like my own safety, my own security, and all that kind of stuff. And when we're in that fear mode, it can be really hard to remember, I actually have something to give here. And not only do I have something to give, but it's pretty freaking brilliant, because if I didn't have it to give, if it wasn't brilliant, I wouldn't have it to give in the first place, right? So your skills, your talents, your gifts, own them and use them to the fullest that you can. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be the best, right? Like the comparison game, like without the comparison, without the judgment. Here's another thing. So often the women that I'm working with, they have this like awesome creative talent that is untapped. And this is something I've given a lot of thought to, and I'm like super curious about, and that's a whole nother thing. But so often our creativity gets stifled and squashed, and it's not who we think we're supposed to be, so we ignore it and we stuff it over here. And for whatever reason, I'm seeing people who are stuffing their creativity over here, that energy is coming out over here with food and unsustainable food behaviors, whether it's controlling or comforting or numbing, right? And so what if you reclaimed your creativity, owned it, and it was brilliant? Would you need food in the same way? I don't know the answer to that, but ask yourself that, because it's something that I see hugely, that the more someone is stepping into their creativity and their full brilliance, self-expression, the less they need something else to define them by, either their body, or the less they need food to comfort or control. So, okay, one last thing for you. It's choice. So what I've just shared with you is that's kind of like a 7-pronged approach to reclaiming yourself and bringing yourself back into the picture and healing sustainably. One, your relationship to yourself first. It's almost the backwards thing. First you heal your relationship to self, then that can extend out into your relationship with food and body. But all of that comes down to choice and a commitment to yourself. Again, Emily said so much of this morning in yoga. And a lot of times I think what happens is we're not actually consciously making choices that are going to care for ourselves and that are in alignment with who we want to be. And so after kind of clearing all that space and rebuilding it with who you actually are, you get to choose yourself on a daily basis, and you get to choose courage, you get to choose care, right? And you get to choose your own creativity and who you want to be in the world. And this is where it comes back to baby steps, because it really is a process of day to day making those choices and then seeing where that leads you to. So that's the last thing I'll leave you with, is just how could you make a choice today that's going to be aligned with who you want to be. And so maybe that's having a conversation that you knew was going to be a little bit difficult, but you can work up the courage to have it. Maybe the choice is that, you know what, I'm going to go to yoga tonight. I wasn't going to, but I know it's the best thing for me. Maybe the choice is not to go to yoga because you realize actually the only reason I'm going is to try to control my body, and tonight I'm going to give my body care, right? So again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's really understanding what is right for you and continuing to choose that over and over. So that's essentially what I have to offer in terms of how you can start to heal your relationship to food and into your body and to yourself. I'd really love to hear your feedback on that. So if anything's really hit home for you and you've had any aha moments, let me know. If you have any questions, then definitely let me know. Feel free to leave comments below this video, and you can also contact me directly if you want to send a private chat. So my name is Kendra Tanner, so you can find me on Facebook. You can also find me through the True You Project, so it's the True You Project on our website. We're also on Instagram. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this Facebook Live, on Sunday, February 11th, I'm starting a course, Your True You Journey, which essentially is going to walk through everything I've just shared with you, but in a lot more depth. And so you'll have daily practices that you can do for yourself at home, a lot of time for community and connection, and also personal guidance from me. So if that's something that sounds like it would be the most caring, courageous choice for yourself, and it's what you need right now, then definitely get in touch. A couple questions that are frequently asked questions. I'm not sure I've ever actually thought of it that way, but some questions that people have been asking about the course lately. So one is, there's scholarship available. So if the course is 175 pounds, it runs from February 11th through April 22nd, and we meet for 9 weeks. So you can pay it all up front, or you can pay over 3 months, 60 pounds a month. If that is something that does not fit into your financial life at the moment, and it would create financial hardship, but you know that you really, really want to join, and you know that this is the best thing you could do for yourself right now, then please get in touch. There is scholarship available, both partial scholarship and full scholarship. Some common scenarios that we want to support people are in is when perhaps they're out of work, perhaps they're a student, perhaps they've gone through a recent crisis, and so it's kind of left them hanging, and they don't know how to get started, but they know that having this experience would really help them. So definitely get in touch about that. The other question that comes up is sort of like, how much do I have to contribute? And I would say this, like, I open up the space, you can share as much about yourself as you want to, but this is, again, it's making the choices right for you. And so sometimes listening is equally as valuable, and remember that my presence is enough. So you being there is the important part. People ask me, well, I can't make every week. Can I still join? Absolutely. And I'll also say this, that being with each other is, the feedback that I get is that that is the most valuable thing. So your presence is important from what you contribute and just sort of in the space. So the more you can make, it's valuable to the rest of the group. I like to tell people, if we're meeting 9 sessions and you know you can make 7 of them, awesome. If it's going to be like I only can make 2, it's probably not the right time to do it. If it's somewhere in the middle, then get in touch with me and we can talk about it. The other thing is, how much time is it going to take me? So we meet weekly for 2 hours. The session is 2 hours, so there's that amount of time. And also, I really highly recommend that you start carving out time for yourself during the week. You get a copy of this book, and so I recommend going through that on your own pace during the course of the course. And I don't know, maybe that's 10 minutes a day, maybe some days it's a half an hour, maybe you have the luxury of an hour, whatever it is, but just starting to create time for you is what's going to help in the long run heal your relationship with food and body, because you need to start with that connection to yourself. So those are some common questions that come up. If you have any others, then definitely get in touch. And if you'd like to join, we have space, so you're very welcome to. And aside from that, I really hope that today has given you some food for thought. Sorry, that was totally unintended pun. But it's giving you some things to think about of where you could start to sort of pull on those strings and start to change your patterns with relationship to food and body. So thanks so much. Namaste. It's been great having you, and I'm going to have to turn this around to turn this off, so you're going to see a little bit craziness.